What do you do for a living? We're talking about what you actually do, what you actually create, what you improve, and what you contribute, not about your job title or your regular duties. This question might be simple to answer, but it might be more difficult for those of you who manage a human resources team at an insurance underwriting company as middle managers. Welcome to the Financial Flow. Please like and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up on our latest videos. Over the past century, the percentage of jobs in the service industry has increased from less than 25% to nearly 80%. Today, when we consider service jobs, we picture individuals bringing us coffee, locating a pair of pants in the closet, or bringing luggage to our hotel room. Even if they are unnecessary luxury for the users of these services, it is still clear that they have value. The service sector, however, is much broader than its name would imply. It includes everyone from call center salespeople to CEOs. In fact, it can be very challenging these days to find a job outside of the service industry because those positions necessitate specialized certifications. Keep that in mind when you need it. However, the expansion of the self-serving service sector and the associated increase in employment seem a little strange. The efficient free market would undoubtedly exclude these individuals who offer nothing, penalizing businesses that pay their salaries while rewarding those that can function without them, right? Okay, no. We must first examine Soviet communism in order to understand this peculiarity of contemporary advanced capitalism. On the principle of honorable labor, the Soviet Union was created. The state deemed that labor to be respectable and honorable. People in the Soviet, which is a loose translation of a workers' council, took great pride in their work above all else. When there wasn't enough work to go around for everyone, this led to issues. Some people received tasks that were obviously completely unnecessary as a result of the push for full employment. It was honorable to supervise the work of so many of your comrades, so factory owners hired as many workers as they could. They also feared that they wouldn't be able to find the people they needed in the future if they didn't give people jobs now. As worker hoarding came to be known, it resulted in some people receiving permanent job losses. Although modern world and 1950s Russia clearly differ greatly from one another, there are some alarming similarities as well. After the anthropologist David Graeber published a book in which he outlined 5 broad categories of jobs that had become increasingly common, the theory of totally unnecessary jobs really began to take off. He referred to the first group as flunkies, which include people who work as doormen, receptionists, chauffeurs, and assistants, if they are even needed at all. These people could all be easily replaced by technology because all they do is make other people feel better about themselves. Then there are the duct tapers, who work temporarily solve issues that could easily be resolved permanently. Consider an inventory manager who, by chance, has the authority to update stock levels in a warehouse, where such an action could be automated or at the very least distributed among floor staff. In his book, Graeber describes a duct taper whose sole responsibility was to correct the errors made by an ostensibly brilliant statistician. The duct taper had to fight with the bureaucracy to get his mistakes corrected before they could do any harm, because this star employee was actually hopeless. This example demonstrates that sometimes removing an employee from a position is not the best course of action. Although the duct taper was probably making a contribution, they could have done so much more efficiently if an unnecessary barrier had not been present. The following job category, box tickers, cannot be said to fall under the same umbrella. The army of mindless drones that work for large corporations around the world because they give those corporations a credible appearance to other large corporations. Consider the individuals who produce the internal company publications that feature articles about important executives or other topics. A company might appear to be a small fry, not worth doing business with or working for. If it didn't have an internal newspaper, a party planning committee, or a culture coordinator, the goons will follow. A class of jobs known affectionately as goons actually have a detrimental effect on society, but become necessary due to their very existence. Corporate lawyers who work in-house are a prime example of this. They don't actually produce anything. but the cost of hiring outside counsel to defend against lawsuits from businesses with internal corporate lawyers will end up being much higher if you don't have them. The best illustration of this might be patent trolls, which are businesses that acquire rivals with a large number of generic patents and they try to sue them in the hope that they will agree to a settlement outside of court. Even the biggest corporations on the planet are complicit in continuing to play this negative sum game. In addition to lawyers, there are other individuals who work to change the game's rules, such as lobbyists and salespeople, whose sole purpose in life is to transfer business transactions from one company to another while acting as the prototypical middleman. You may think the goons are bad now, but they are nothing compared to the absolute worst among this group of useless employees, the job masters. These are the individuals tasked with supervising and managing those who genuinely don't require supervision or management. Effective management is possible, particularly when coordinating a team with a diverse set of skills, but someone like a sales manager who rules over a group of employees who all have the same job title is a little bit different. At best, they will serve an overpaid cheerleader who motivates others to work harder in their roles. That could be strange in and of themselves. At worst, they will be ineffective interruptions scrambling to defend their existence by scheduling pointless meetings that only serve to divert workers from tasks where they might actually have a chance to contribute something worthwhile. These roles are not absolute guidelines. In fact, some particularly ineffective employees may discover that their role combines all 5 of these elements. Many middle managers supervise departments that are essentially useless, and they only have jobs because a complex corporate structure makes the powerful people at the top of the food chain feel good about themselves. However, this is not adequate response. Where did we come from? Because it was obsessed with providing employment for everyone, and because the Soviet Union took pride in its labor force, it created these types of jobs. But our capitalist systems ought to be superior to that, don't they? Sure, businesses would benefit from reducing these tasks, but occasionally, these incentives may not be in the line with the people making the decisions. Modern middle managers will act in the same way that a Soviet factory worker might gather employees to give the impression that they are important. Modern workplaces are obsessed with everyone working their full 40-hour weeks, even if it means creating meaningless tasks, just as the Soviet Union was obsessed with everyone having work to do. This is before we take the bureaucracy into account. Let's get into one thing straight. In nations like the USA, there are laws and regulations about pretty much everything, so there aren't entirely free markets there. Now, I'm not saying this to support large or small government. Some policies are very important. However, businesses have also played a significant role in this entire system. Without a team of accountants and attorneys who can help a business owner navigate this bureaucracy, it is nearly impossible to launch and maintain a successful business of any size as a result of the growth in lobbying and the ensuing legislation. You could argue that doing this serves the interests of big businesses because it makes more difficult for potential rivals to get off the ground, but we don't want to place blame. Is there a remedy for this? As a whole, yes. Accept the notion that working less than 40 hours per week is acceptable. It would be much simpler to identify those who are making no contributions if it were acceptable to say, my work is done and I'm done for the day. As a unique person? The truth is that if you end up in a position with a lot of tasks, you might have to put up with it for the time being, and perhaps work on a stress-free side project during your downtime. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have a good one.